Hi everyone, I'm Carrie from Stampin Up, here to show you the basics of blending with Stampin Blends. Stampin Blends are alcohol markers, and when you use them to color stamped images, they give you beautiful, rich, saturated, smooth color. So let me show you the basics of how to get a look like this with Stampin Blends. The first step is to prepare your work surface by covering it with grid paper or scrap paper or something porous to absorb excess ink. One of the results of that saturated color is that ink can seep through your paper, so we want to be ready for that. Next, stamp your image. We recommend Tuxedo Black Memento ink and Whisper White cardstock for the best results. I'm using the door stamp from the At Home With You set. It's a great one to use for a technique like this because of the line art with lots of room to color. So I'll get that image stamped, and you'll want to make sure that your ink is dry, completely dry, before you start coloring. I'm going to use the light and dark shade of Cherry Cobbler on our door. So I'll start with the light shade. And actually, if you're just starting, I would recommend simply coloring the image. Don't even worry about blending. Just color in how you would normally color with markers. These are so much fun to color with. The color goes on so smoothly. And here's one I did ahead of time. The frame I colored in with basic gray. So it looks great. There's no choppy lines or harsh brush strokes, but we can step it up even a little bit more by blending in some of the dark shade to give it depth and dimension. So I'm going to start with a clean image. One tip about blending when you start blending is that the ink will blend more easily and smoothly when it's wet. So I'm actually going to break down this door into smaller sections when I color it, so the ink will stay moist before I bring in my darker shade. Now I'll start just like before, coloring in with my light shade of Cherry Cobbler, but like I mentioned, just in a smaller section. And you'll want to go over it a couple times. Go slowly. Remember, you want that ink to be wet, so really lay down a good base coat. We want that saturated color. So now we've got a good base. I'll bring in the darker shade. And with this one, I just kind of want to outline and then add some shadows and a little bit of shading. I know there would be a little bit of a shadow right here, kind of where that overhang happens, and maybe just around the edges a little bit. And again, go over it a couple of times. Really layer on the color to get it more saturated. If you do end up with a line that's too harsh or too shows up too much, you can come back in with your lighter shade and just kind of soften or blend out that line. So there's my first section. Now you just kind of repeat that same process on your next section. Do the same thing. Lay down a good base coat with your light color. And then come in with your darker shade to outline and add shadows. So I think you can kind of get the hang of that. Here's one that I did ahead of time, and you can kind of see where those shadows fall, and again, a little bit of shading around the frame. Now let me bring in the one that was simply colored before, and even though they both look great, you can see the difference. The one with the blending has a little bit more dimension and depth. It's just stepped up a little bit. And here's what that image looks like on a finished card. We just took the corner of that door, and added some flowers and the sign from the same stamp set to make that really cute thank you card. So for that first card, we started with the light shade and then added dark. But you can also start with your darker shade and add the light. You get a similar result, so the way you blend is really just personal preference. But I wanted to show you that dark to light method. And for this one, we will use the Climbing Orchid stamp set. I stamped the leaf from the stamp set ahead of time, and you can see I have one already colored in, but I want to color the second one for you. This time I'm using Old Olive Stampin Blends, and like I mentioned, we'll start with the darker shade. Now for this one, I'm just going to outline the outside of the stamped image. That's where I want my darker shade to be. And since that line is pretty sharp, I just want to soften it a little bit, maybe with some circular strokes, or kind of swipe the color toward the center, just so it's not quite so harsh. Makes it a little bit more easy to blend. And now I'll come in with the lighter color. I'm going to color right over that darker shade, and you might have to go over it a couple of times because remember, the ink will blend more easily when it's wet. So once you get that line blended out, then you just kind of bring the color to the center, and the center will be the lightest part of your image. Now I also colored in the petals of the orchid. I used the pumpkin pie light and dark shade, the exact same method. I just outlined with the darker shade and then brought the color to the center with the lighter shade. And here's what all of those pieces look like layered onto a finished card. Isn't that orchid beautiful? And you can see the depth and dimension. It gives it a more realistic look. Blending with Stampin' Blends is as easy as that. They are so much fun to use and you get beautiful artistic results. If you are itching to try coloring with these amazing markers, contact your demonstrator or visit stampinup.com to place an order. You'll be blending in no time.